Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Michelle Thompson, and today is January 18th, 2023. I'm really excited to be joined by Jennie Garcia, who's going to talk a bit about herself, the work that she's doing, and what we're trying to get in terms of neighborhood planning engagement and education in general, but for for University of New Orleans. Welcome, Jennie.
Thanks, Dr. T.
Thank you. So we're going to have a conversation, and even though we have had some questions about your background and where some advice that you can give, I think where I want to start certainly is for you to let us know a bit about what are your passions and a bit about your profession. So please
Yeah.
talk about yourself.
So currently, let's see, I work for the Office of Cultural Development within the Division of Historic Preservation. Sometimes people refer to us as the SHPO office or the State Historic Preservation Office. I am technically an architectural historian too, but what my day-to-day activities cover are Section 106 reviews, maintaining our GIS database for all above ground resources that have been surveyed within the state of Louisiana. And I also help to oversee the Division of Historic Preservation grants that are given out annually. So day to day, Section 106, basically all federally funded projects, federal licenses and permits have to get reviewed for any potential impacts to cultural resources in our state. So I help to review those projects that look at impacts to the above ground, so building, structure, objects, sites. We do have Division of Archaeology that handles all below ground cultural resources that may be impacted. So what are my passion is, my passion honestly is researching, and that is where I get the greatest joy out of my job. You know, we get these big projects, little projects. Sometimes they're for like facade renovations on a residential home or a commercial building. They're getting HUD funding, and it's interesting to start trying to research the property. Is this something considered historic? Is it in a National Register district? When was it constructed? And that's where my joy comes from. I could spend all day researching and finding information and having people survey properties and put it on our map, and really just kind of engaging with resources, historic resources or non-historic resources that we uncover through all these projects, because the state's huge. And sometimes I enjoy when we get a rural area and I'm like, there's nothing there, but there's something there, and the community gets excited. And you know, they're like, call my office, we got this big project, what's the status? I'm like, we know, we're trying to help you. You know, these are all the other things we could be doing. So that's my passion in a nutshell, doing research.
And so, is that one of the reasons why this semester you decided to start a PhD in urban studies? Kind of what thought process went into that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I never thought about the way a place has developed until I went to UNO as a MERP student, and understanding how a neighborhood came to place, or a city or a town, or what was the commerce that got this area going. And um so as a I guess now official PhD student, I'm more interested in people and places that may have impacted a neighborhood, or you know, different organizations that may have gotten started in the city. How did we get started with like stormwater management? Where did that come from? Who came up with this idea? Where did it begin? How has it evolved over time? Or schools, you know, where were schools built? Why? For what community? How have they changed over time? How has the neighborhood changed over time? So, um, you know, because a lot of those histories can get lost. We forget, things get put on a shelf somewhere, and you know, you get attached to a place and you really want to learn about it. And so that's pretty like that's why I'm interested in getting a PhD in urban studies to better hone my skills and to focus and to learn how to pull all my research into, I guess, a working document that people want to read and understand and help inform a community.
Thank you. So, one of the interesting things that I learned a lot from you about is historic preservation and the stories that, as you just mentioned, can get lost. So, one of the most amazing opportunities that I had is when I went to Hammond and you were showing me around a grave. So, talk about your job at Hammond and why are graves important when it comes to history?
Yeah, so um for a little while I was the director of the Hammond Historic District, and it's really interesting, especially with smaller towns. You know, you have like the big star of the town. Everybody knows who founded it, the founding families, this, that, and the other. But you know, there are other people who are important, that are sometimes not well known within the larger context of the area. And um, it was interesting. It was the cemetery, one of the ones I showed you. Um, it was within a neighborhood, and the land was actually deeded to an African American. I can't remember what denomination of faith it was, but it was supposed to be built for a church, and the church never got built for whatever reason, and they eventually started using it to inter some of their church members who passed on. But at the same time, a neighborhood developed around it, and so it's you know tombstones get lost, headstones get lost, records aren't very well maintained, and next thing you know, we see neighbors basically using the cemetery as an extra backyard. And one of the reasons why I brought you there was because it was a city-owned property. It wasn't within the historic district, so I had no jurisdiction over it, but it was just interesting trying to look at the ordinances, who owns it, who's in charge of maintaining it, how are we maintaining it, and trying to um, get the city to be held accountable to protect it, because that those are people. They're no longer alive, but there could be some interesting people buried within there that are contributing members of the community or just somebody's relative. I mean, that's just
Mhm.
respect, right? And unfortunately, I didn't stay on much longer, than 2 years within that position before I moved on to another job. But it was just constantly reading how the ordinances of the city and just trying to figure out like who regulates what, how did this come into place, how can we you know push those laws, those local laws, and keep everything working and have just respect for a cemetery that's been forgotten, and that happens all the time. You've got development, people want to build, and it was a beautiful lot with beautiful oak trees, but you forget about these things and they get overgrown and they get neglected and people forget, time passes, and next thing you know it looks like a vacant lot. And it's not uncommon. We see it all the time. And I think now with social media and highlighting minority cemeteries, we're really kind of starting to get to the point where people are being held accountable, and we're trying to recollect that history and document it better and preserve those people that are interred there.
Great, thank you. So, one of the most fascinating items that I know about your background is that you were an elementary school teacher. And then when I met you, you were then, as you mentioned, a MERP, a master's in urban and regional planning in the Department of Planning and Urban Studies. So I want you to go back a little bit to not the elementary school, but to to the decision-making process. What's really interesting that I found is not many students will come to a university as an undergrad even thinking or knowing what a planning degree is or what planners do. And coming from elementary school teacher to MERP, can you talk about that interest in that program, what you found that was useful in terms of what you then came afterwards to be able to do? Maybe some of the soft skills, hard skills, or technical. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the big reasons why I left the education profession, it was never the children, as people were like, "Oh my god, children all day long." No, they were fun. It was somebody made a comment, one of my coworkers made a comment that, "You never remember your 3rd grade teacher." And I was like, "I remember my 3rd grade teacher. I remember 3rd grade." But it just kinda hit me, and I was like, "You know, you're kind of right. Most people don't remember 3rd grade teachers, 2nd grade teachers, you know." And I felt like I wanted to make a bigger impact than just teaching to a school within a community. Um, so then I started trying to figure out, like, how can I get a job where I'm making a bigger impact on a bigger scale beyond an elementary classroom. So I started looking around and I knew I didn't want to move. So I looked at UNO. I went there as an undergrad and I was like, what do we have here? And I stumbled across the MERT program. So, but as a teacher, a former teacher, I think it's more of like the juggling act of um because teaching's very demanding. You're pretty much on all the time, even when you try to turn yourself off. You're constantly thinking about how to prepare for the next day. What do I need to do? So, transitioning to a master's in regional planning at UNO, I was commuting from Baton Rouge. My first year, I was still teaching. So it was this constant like keeping a schedule. Where am I at? What do I have? Where are my deadlines? And constantly juggling that. I think that was one of the best things I got from the teaching profession. And also just the ability to kind of maybe empathize more with people around me because, you know, you're trying to understand small people and how do you get along with a small person all the time and there's like 30 of them. So, I think, you know, that's kind of helped me to, um, sometimes be more flexible on certain things and try to understand where people are coming from and, uh, just always trying to be as overly prepared for the next task that I know is coming because, um, life is life, and if I can get a paper done ahead of time, it's like one less thing I have to stress about, it's done, it's over with. So Um, I think that's the best soft skill I've gotten from teaching is just that understanding of how to juggle a lot of things at the same time.
So while you, again, I should say we've had a number of classes together, but I will just say, of course, as a personal note, that was one of the things that stood out in terms of organizing schedules, being able to work with team members in an effective way. Um, you absolutely showed that side, and that's one of the hardest parts of working with teams. So as you continued through your master's in urban and regional planning, and now in your positions with the state, what type of classes did you take and what kind of skills really do you feel were more beneficial? Or was it skills and experience or a combination? And can you talk about a project or projects that you worked on that really helped you decide kind of what direction you wanted to go in after leaving UNO?
I think it was a combination of skills and classes. Um, Everything that I have done has had some kind of GIS component, whether it
And
was in
GIS is?
geographic information systems. So I've had internships, jobs, everything has had some kind of mapping component to it. So that was one of the biggest skills. The other one was um, learning how to put together technical documents. Um, when you're trying to put together like a data dictionary, a how-to guide, try really understanding the other side of this document, who's going to read it, who can understand it, and does it make sense? Those skills. One of the interesting internships I had was Katrina claim litigation case that I got to work on because I have GIS skills. And we've got addresses where people are saying this is where my house was, and there's literally an empty lot, and trying to verify that there's a building there, there's an address there, going to the assessor, and then learning all the interesting New Orleans address issues that we have there. That was really an interesting project to work on. I also got to intern, and we worked on bringing everything and all of the Army national bases into a GIS database so they could query like how many aluminum fence posts they have, and we had them all mapped for all the bases. And so if they had to replace a fence line at one of the facilities, they knew exactly how many they had, how much linear feet. I mean, I'm just gonna say mapping in GIS is one of the most fun parts. I've worked for a cultural resource firm, and being able to send maps to the SHPO office, showing where we've done shovel tests, located buildings that have never been recorded in the middle of a field or a cemetery, and documenting that and mapping it with locational information. And I would say that, and technical memorandums. Currently, we've been within my office, me and one of my other coworkers have been helping to develop a surveying app. It's just kind of like a tester. We're not sure if it's gonna get off the ground. There's a lot of kinks, but when we were kind of given this program, I was like, "Where's the how-to guide?" And it was like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, how do we use it? How do I give it to a surveyor? How do I give it to somebody who's going to test this?" And so then it was like, okay, how do we write this document? What do we need? What information do they need? How do we expect them to complete it? We don't you don't want just people putting random information. You want to try and keep it uniform and easy to use and easy to, go in and run whatever data test that you need to run to go, oh, we've uncovered X amount of National Register eligible properties, or this community has a district. What's going on with their district? And then what does it mean to be a district? Can we help them get funding? Can we help revitalize the community? So I'm always like writing some kind of technical document, whether it's for myself or for work, on just the processes. And that's really helped a lot. My capstone project, which was I worked with 3 other classmates, and we went to St. John the Baptist Parish, and they were interested in historic districts, and we kind of did a windshield survey of the areas that they were pretty sure where they had some historic buildings. And now they have cultural districts in those areas, which also opens up for funding. And I learned a lot on that one, just because I was pretty familiar with LaPlace along Airline Highway. I did not realize how much history was in that parish, and it was a real eye opener. And that was one of my best projects, and I know my classmates were excited about it, and we got a lot of good experience on it, and understanding how do you write historic district ordinances, and researching the Louisiana state enabling legislation for historic districts in this, just really kind of getting down into like the nitty gritty, like how does this happen? And that was, I mean, a lot of great stuff comes from UNO, bottom line.
That's good.
I mean, I could talk all day about my MERP experience. Being taught how to go out and do a survey. That was one of the skills we brought into our capstone because, it's like you go out and you're like, what are we collecting? And because of a GIS class where we had to go out and survey, I said, oh, we made survey cards. Let's tailor the survey cards to fit this project. Because the other thing is, we're not getting paid. We're poor grad students and we have to print these things out. So how can we get like 4 survey cards on a piece of paper and save time and get it done quickly? Like what is the information the parish is looking for? Is it a yes historic, no historic? How detailed is the information? And I know um, from that project, they were able to justify hiring outside consultants to do a more in-depth survey of these districts and collect that information. And it was just everything at UNO. I mean, I don't think there was a bad class. Everything.
That's good. Well, I think that, and I have only two other items for you. So one is, what you just talked about is something that the university in general really is really proud of, that we are considered the city's university. It is a testing ground. It is a laboratory, a living laboratory. But things have changed. Things have changed because of climate change and crime and the pandemic. So one of the challenges, I think, for many professors, not just at UNO, but across the country and around the world, is that the nature of teaching planning has changed, and being able to engage with community and to be able to collect information and having those experiences, being able to, as I remember you taking a team out and being able to figure out how do we get as much information that we can on a piece of paper in the field, taking photographs, creating a database, and then coming back and developing that into a product that can be used by the community. And you really can't learn that from reading a book. So my question is, given that the idea of teaching online education or having remote experiences in education, what would your concerns be for future planners? Or had you thought about how this pandemic, in the changing way that all of us now can really work remotely, live remotely, but what effect do you think that will have on community engagement, let's say?
So that's interesting because, I got hired in my current position during peak shutdown, work from home, and it's been interesting because a lot of these meetings were typically held in person and now they're not. Which is good and bad because I feel like with Zoom meetings, Skype meetings, or team meetings, whatever you want to call them, you could reach a large, hopefully reach a larger audience, and anybody can attend because sometimes these meetings are in other parishes that are hours away. But at the other side of it, I feel like there's a little bit of um, disinterest when we're on a call. You lose your attention. Something else is going on in the background, so you're not as invested, right? You're not as involved. And I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle, is to keep that involvement and that excitement within an online platform, because it's easy. You shut your computer, you move on, and you forget about it, right? Whereas when you go to a meeting, you meet people, you make connections, you're really interacting with them face to face. So I honestly think that's the biggest challenge moving forward. Because I was taking classes at another university and I was working from home, and I'm taking classes from home, and you're sitting in the same spot all day, every day. Unfortunately, coffee shops were closed. I couldn't like escape my house. Um, so I think I honestly think that's their biggest challenge. But at the same time, like going out in the field, you're told keep your distance from people. Well, I'm in the field. I can keep my distance. You're on that block, I'm on this block. So I think we can keep that going, but to teach online and to I think the professor would have to understand with like a project and how to get people outside working on the project and coming back into an online environment. So I think it's good in a way that you could be anywhere doing something, you could reach a larger audience, but it's how do you keep people invested in what you're doing, I think is the biggest challenge. And if you're in, I don't know, Colorado and your class is in New Orleans and they're talking about New Orleans, it's kind of hard to relate. But if you could maybe, um, I don't know, find something in Colorado that's similar, or your professor understands that this is a problem in Colorado, a planning problem in Colorado that's similar to what's going on in New Orleans. How do we connect? How do we keep everybody engaged and involved? So I hope that answers
Oh,
your
oh, absolutely. And I think that I appreciate the clarity on the engagement, because it is difficult to know and to try to get that sense, which is very different in a classroom than in online. And I think that's one of I think the challenges for students are who have never, maybe now they're going into kind of like a whole online undergraduate education or even some master's classes, that they may not understand what they're missing. And so when, after they get out of school and you have to start working in teams, or you have to working in certain environments, that's going to be an adjustment made. But I think that I found that I had a student who wanted to do an internship, and she was in Austria and ended up doing her internship with the New Orleans Business Alliance, doing interviews with small businesses who then got grants to be able to, recover from, or try to recover from the pandemic. I think to me, it's a lot of creativity. But
question.
also what I heard from you is just awareness that, we as professors really have to think about different ways to engage students. And that's what I'm hoping that this conversation is part of. Go ahead.
Well, I had this one assignment. I don't remember what the class was called, but we had to go to like a planning meeting. And
Introduction to neighborhood planning.
is this the class? And one of the reasons why I remember this is because I live in Baton Rouge. And I remember panicking, like, oh my God, how am I going to get from Baton Rouge to a planning meeting in the city of New Orleans, parking, and just, but luckily, my professor said, well, you can attend a planning meeting in Baton Rouge. And at that time, I really thought I wanted to get into transportation. I love biking everywhere. I've lived in Baton Rouge for a year without a bike. I don't recommend, but I did it. It can be done. And so I went to a bike meeting. So I was like, how I want to get involved. I want to know these people, and I want to hear some of the issues we have, like why aren't we more bikeable? What's going on with the city? And so doing those kind of activities and just knowing that, what is your passion? I thought mine was biking. It wasn't after that meeting. But um but it's like, you have to take the initiative to put yourself out there, right? And um I'm one of those people. I will call you, I will email you. I'm if I'm interested, I'm there. And I may not be interested after a while. I'm like, yeah, that's not for me. I thought wrong. But doing stuff like that, and it also helped me. There was an organization here for a little while. It was called Coffee on a Porch, and it was an LSU professor, and I forget what his colleague did, but they were interested in just kind of bringing community members together. And I don't even remember how we met, but he was asking me, can you help me make maps? And so I was like, yeah, I'm pro bono. I'll work for you for free. And so we started working together with other people, other community members, and once a month we would meet at different establishments within what we call Mid City in Baton Rouge. And sometimes it was a church, sometimes it was just a lawyer's office, sometimes it was just whoever wanted to open up their facility just to say, hey, we're here, we're going to talk about this community issue, and we have coffee. That's why it's called Coffee on the Porch. And it was a great experience to see other parts of Baton Rouge that I would never have thought to just go to, and to meet other people with similar interest, or to hear the concerns of a certain neighborhood. One of them was just basic bus transportation, which has always been an issue that I think we have here in Baton Rouge. We actually have more dedicated bike lanes that have been going up, so I think we're getting a little bit better. But it's just trying to, like, how do you navigate in your community? And that was one of the reasons why one of the reasons why I decided not to have a car for a year, because I really wanted to understand how to move about without a car and with a broken bus system.
Mm,
It would
wow.
have probably taken me 3 hours to go the 2 miles down the street to the school that I was working in. So I was like, I'm gonna bike.
Well, and down to my last point, what I find fascinating is like one of the projects that I'm working in now is about the 15-minute city. And the idea of purposely not having a car for a year, to me, it would say that the idea of planning for all and understanding, I mean, there's an empathy there, but the reality is that what I think about in terms of the folks who don't have a choice to have a car, how much longer it takes to get two places, the cost in time, the cost in money, and what I have surmised is that it really does cost a lot more to be poor. And
Yeah.
that's really difficult. And so I think that's something in terms of we lifelong learners, that's my latest passion and interest is learning how can we make resources more accessible to others. And so that you've helped me reflect upon that just now. So my last item that I know it's only been a few years, and this is a question that people usually ask another 20 years from now for someone like you. But if you were talking to the younger Jennie, younger-ish Jennie, or the early career Jennie, going from even from an if you were an undergrad in planning versus education and then the master's, what would you say to yourself about being prepared, getting prepared? I think you talked about time management, multitasking, and being, but is there something that you could give as a way of advice to those folks who are looking at this to think about their education before they know whether they're interested in transportation or computer mapping or whether they want to get out of planning and go into teaching? I have no idea.
Well,
But I'm just wondering if you could talk about that for a minute and then we'll close.
yeah, somebody once told me, always do something that you're proud of. And I wish that was something I was told when I was younger. Because growing up, I was always told, you've got to get a job, and you got to get a job that pays well. Not necessarily get a job that you love every single day of this. I mean, we're all going to have our days with our work where we're like, oh, I hate this place, I don't want to be here. But at the end of the day, I want to feel like what I'm doing is something that I'm proud of. And I feel like, even we all need money. I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to say we're not here for the money. That's never true. We're always here for the money. We all have to live. That's the bottom line. But if you can find something that you are proud of doing on a regular basis, I think that that is what's telling of what you should be doing. I love my job. I love what I do. Is it what I want to do for the rest of my life? Probably not. But for now, I am happy and proud of where I am, and I feel like um, sometimes, you know, it's hard when you're reviewing these projects and you get attached to a building and you've got to let it go and you just, you know, it's progress. But at the end of the day, I would say be proud of what you do and take pride in your work, and it'll always come through, you know. It'll be there.
That is
So
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that thought. And truly, thank you for this time.
yeah, anytime.